4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. Has it been live? Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Welcome to our brilliant and savvy audience. As you know, almost everyone has an opinion about the incredible world events unfolding right before our eyes as we are in a pivotal moment of history for the United States and the world. We're not going to offer you the same warmed over commentary. We're going to try to give you some more in-depth analysis and critically historical perspective.
Critically,
that puts today's events into some meaningful framework.
Okay. You're a meaningful guy, and you're here to put this into meaningful framework, huh?
I hope we can.
All right.
I think we'll succeed. And we're always helped out by our phenomenally insightful questions.
Phenomenally
insightful questions.
You got it.
Say that 3 times fast.
Phenomenally.
You
Actually,
did it.
It's easier
Don't ask
saying
me
it.
to do that.
It was easier saying 3 times fast than it was saying it once.
Yeah.
Right. President Belichick is back. I haven't seen
All right,
that guy
we haven't
in a long
seen
time.
him or her for a long time.
Them, yes. Our first topic of the evening. The Pentagon is seeking $200 billion in additional funds for the Iran war, a sizable amount that is certain to be met with questions from Congress, which would need to approve any new money.
There is so much to be said about this.
Okay.
Let's first of all put this in perspective, okay, Sam?
Okay, Dad.
How much does the war cost approximately every day?
$1 billion.
$1 billion, maybe more, but let's just say $1 billion. If you appropriate 200 million more for the war, how many more days does that enable them to fight?
200?
200 more days, almost 7 additional months.
Yikes.
What this reminds me of, because we're going to put things, the big theme of tonight is to try to put things in historical perspective.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the Tet Offensive in 1968?
Was that in Vietnam?
In Vietnam, when the North launched an all-out attack on centers of South Vietnamese and American strength, and almost succeeded in overturning these centers of power for the South Vietnamese and the Americans. By the skin of their teeth, the Americans and their allies survived. But it was a huge blow to American prestige and to the idea that Americans can prevail in the war. So, who was president then, Sam? Do you know?
Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah, you're right on top of
Wow, holy moly.
So, what do you think his military answer to this was? What did they want?
More money.
More money to support another 200,000 troops
Money.
in Vietnam to indefinitely prolong the war.
Right.
And Johnson's very smart Secretary of Defense, Clark Clifford, who had run
That's
Harry
a made-up
Truman's-
name.
Yeah,
Clark Clifford?
Clark Clifford.
No,
You know who he was married to?
No.
You ever hear of Linda Carter? You know who she was?
No.
Wonder Woman.
Oh.
The original Wonder Woman. That was his wife.
Wow.
That's what he was most famous for, aside from running Harry Truman's whistle-stop, come-from-behind campaign in 48. And he said, you can't do this. This is a disaster. You're losing public opinion. You're losing America's status and standing around the world. And that was, of course, the beginning of the end of the Johnson administration. What did he do shortly after that, Sam, when it came to his reelection?
He didn't run.
He bombed out. Right. So, there is some real historical perspective here.
Okay.
The other thing, of course, when you're talking about $200 billion more, you know what that brings the defense budget to?
A lot.
$1.2 trillion. That's
a
about
lot.
what the entire federal budget was under Bill Clinton. That's just, how extraordinary.
No, Republicans are fiscally conservative. They save us money. They balance the budgets, don't they?
They are the worst spenders, the worst offenders when it comes to running up deficit and debt. Donald Trump, George W. Bush are among the worst presidents when it comes to the debt, which is the yearly deficit, and then the deficit, which is the yearly shortfall, and then the debt, which is the accumulated shortfalls. Many tens of trillions of dollars. They tell you that they're fiscal hawks and they're big critics of spending. But when they criticize spending, Sam? When they're out of power.
Oh.
When they're in power, they are the biggest spenders we've ever seen. They may spend things on different priorities than the Democrats, but Trump and W. Bush, the most recent Republican presidents, are among the most prolific presidents when it comes to running up deficits and increasing the American federal debt. Now, put this in further perspective. 1.2 trillion, or at least if they get the 200 billion, it's not clear. But assuming they get it, we're spending $200 billion more on a war that doesn't seem to benefit the United States at all, as we pointed out in a previous show, and many other commentators have picked up on this. The United States is not the winner here. The big winner is Netanyahu, who's realizing his dream of devastating his Arab neighbors, and of course, Russia, whose economy is being bailed out by the high oil prices and who had sanctions lifted by the Trump administration. The big losers, of course, are the U.S., which has its economy devastated, Americans killed to seeming no end, and Ukraine, who is, of course, losing vital American support while Russia is becoming stronger than ever. And the other thing to put in perspective here is, to go back to Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson promised he could give us guns and butter. You know what that means?
No.
That means he can fight a war while still sustaining vital programs that are needed for the American people at home.
Okay.
That did not prove to be the case. And we're seeing that even more dramatically under this administration. While they are spending profitably on wars that do us no good. I was, somehow we're inured to this. But the rationale that this warmonger, Pete Hegseth, gave, you know what he said?
No.
We need the money to kill bad guys abroad. Is that the mission of the United States? To go around the world and kill bad guys?
Well, it kind of has been for the 20th and 21st century.
And how well has that worked out for us?
Not well.
Not well. You knock out one set of bad guys, what happens, Sam?
Uh-oh, we're getting a fact check here.
What's that?
Clark Clifford never married Wonder Woman, according to Wikipedia.
I thought he was. Oh.
Let me check that. Keep going.
Oh, man, I'm always happy to be found wrong. I'm getting old. My memory may be a little bit slippery, but I thought he was married to one.
I'm fact checking it right now.
We'll check it. We'll fact check it. And if I'm wrong, unlike Donald Trump, I'm willing to admit it. And it's a minor thing. I don't really care who he's married to.
You don't?
No, not that much.
Apparently he was married in 1931 to Margaret Pepperell Kimball.
Oh.
I don't know who that is.
No, I don't. It's not Wonder Woman.
It doesn't sound. She has no Wikipedia page. Nothing.
Right. Go see who Wonder Woman was married to.
What was her name? Linda.
Not Linda. I forget it now.
Oh, come on.
Let's pass on that.
The original Wonder Woman, you're saying? Okay. Go ahead.
Now I've lost my... Oh. So we're spending all this money on wars that only hurt us, and somehow this administration tells us we can't afford to renew the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which millions of Americans depend upon for their health care. We can't afford to maintain the food stamp and Medicaid programs, which many millions depend upon for their nutrition and their health. We can, abandon the most vulnerable of Americans while spending through the roof to go out around the world and satisfy Pete Hegseth's bloodless to somehow kill bad guys, as if that was supposedly the mission of the United States. Linda Gordon, I think was her name, right?
Linda Carter.
Linda Carter, right?
She was married to Robert Altman, an attorney.
All right, who is associated with Clark Clifford.
Oh, okay.
They were both in that BCC bank that was extremely shady. That's why I got the two mixed up.
They were law partners.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
so
there we go.
There was the connection to Gordon there, to Wonder Woman. Just didn't quite get it right. All right, a very important article providing additional historical perspective in one of my favorite newspapers, The Guardian. And they talk about something we haven't heard much about, Sam.
Really?
And that's the Boer War. Have you heard anything about the Boer War lately?
Not lately.
Do you know what even it is?
No.
It's the War of Great Britain, starting in 1899, against the Afrikaner settlers in South Africa, the Boers. Okay?
Okay.
And at this time, Britain was riding high. It was kind of like the United States in, most of the 20th and early 20th century. The hegemonic power of the world, the great power, the financial heart of the world, the greatest colonial empire, the greatest navy the world had ever seen, one of the greatest military establishments the world had ever seen. It's fighting up against a bunch of Afrikaner farmers in South Africa.
Okay, got it.
And just like the war in Iran, the British leaders believed, quick war, be over right away. We have so much greater power. We'll obliterate them in a way the world has never seen before. Quick war, end it. Did it work out that way, Sam?
I'm assuming not, sir.
3 years.
Wow.
3 years. The war against these African farmers dragged on. And it was the beginning of the end of British hegemony. An enormous blow to British prestige.
Good old hegemony.
Yes. And a tremendous blow to her ability to stand up and maintain her supremacy relative to rising new powers like Germany and the United States.
Can I ask you
the beginning of the end of British dominance of the world.
Can I ask you sort of related question?
Sure.
How important is it for your country to be an empire? Like, as an average citizen, do you think that helps you substantially or no?
I'll give you an anecdote.
Okay.
It's a famous anecdote from one poor person in Great Britain. She says, "What good does it do me to be part of an empire on which the sun never sets, while I live in an alley on which the sun never shines?"
Wow.
I think that says it all.
That says it all.
It does not help the ordinary person. It hurts because all the resources get diverted elsewhere.
Right, that makes sense.
And that's what we're seeing here in the United States.
Right.
Over $1 trillion they want to divert to these feckless military adventures, which Trump has said, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm America first. I think I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. Almost every commentator misunderstands what Trump means when he says America first. That does not mean I'm going to focus on the homeland and forget about what's going on elsewhere in the world. It means the opposite. It means America is first in the world because we have all the power as compared to everyone else, and we can do, as America first, anything we want to do around the world. And Trump's been, as he always is, very out front about that, saying I can do whatever I want, whether at home or whether abroad. That's the real meaning of America first, and almost every commentator I've seen has gotten 180 degrees wrong. So this commentator says there's, such a obvious parallel between what Britain was doing in the Boer War and what Trump is doing in the war in Iran. Elaine. Same like the British. He thought, lightning strike, quick, overwhelming power. The Iranians will quickly capitulate, and, America will reign as America first again. And just as the British found out these high hopes didn't work out, that's exactly what Trump is finding out in this war.
You know what Tupac said, right?
What'd he say?
They got money for wars, but can't feed the poor.
There you go.
There you go.
Said it very succinctly, what we've been saying in a more windy way.
Right.
And this commentator in The Guardian says, look, yeah, maybe Trump will turn around and get out quickly, but we're kind of past that. That would not be a victory. But if this keeps on going, it's going to have a devastating effect on the American economy, just like the Boer War did on the British economy. It's going to have a devastating effect on our allies. American prestige and soft power will take a huge hit, and it's only going to help the rising new powers. And who are they? Who are the two powers that really threaten us? Not Iran.
Tell me.
Come on, Russia and China. Just as the British were falling victim to the rising new powers of their time. It's just an unmitigated disaster based on what I see as very astute historical analysis.
I want to give a quick shout out to Free Throw Guy. They said I said that a week or two ago on here. So they originally put the
Yeah,
Tupac.
we did get a question about the Boer War, didn't we?
No. He was talking about
did.
he was talking about the Tupac quote I just
Oh,
had.
I got it. That's a great quote.
Yeah, I don't think we had a question about the Boer
maybe
Wars,
not.
but oh, you're done with that topic?
I am.
Okay. Speaking of the UK, Britain's National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, attended the final talks between the US and Iran and judged that the offer made by Tehran on its nuclear program was significant enough to prevent a rush to war. More evidence that this war seems like a load of garbage.
Well, I've lost track
Right.
of how many justifications, so many of them contradictory, that the Trump administration has offered. But what this British minister has had to say is of profound importance. Basically what he said, there was no reason to break off those negotiations. In fact, they were going much better than the Trump administration has led us to believe. And while you never know what's going to happen in the end with negotiations, but there certainly was at least a prospect that negotiations could deal peacefully with the problem. Again, highlighting how much this was a war of choice because of Trump's America first. I can do anything I want around the world because I'm first with military power. This was a war of choice, not a war of necessity. And according to this high-level British official who was in these talks, it could have been solved peacefully. And why in the world wouldn't you try to solve it peacefully? Unless you're Donald Trump, who believes you can do anything you want in the world, and who couldn't care less about wars that kill thousands of people or blowing up boats without due process or proof. By the way, a high-ranking U.S. general, one of the leading U.S. generals in the military command, I think he was the head of the Southern Command, just testified that blowing up of these boats is not doing a darn thing to stop the drug problem in the United States.
Oh,
you hear that, Sam?
Oh, you're switching now back to the Americas. Okay.
I just wanted to bring that up,
right?
Because again, it was related to Trump resorting needlessly to violence when other approaches are much more fruitful.
Right. Our next topic. President Donald Trump made a joke about the Japanese attack on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, which led the United States into World War II. During a press conference with Japan's Prime Minister Sane Takachi, the president has been pressing Japan's leader for military help in the Middle East to ease the oil crisis.
This is like trying to catch a fish by throwing an anchor at the fish. If you want Japanese cooperation, and by the way, I'm no fan of that Japanese PM, but that's another issue, then you don't insult them right to their face. Pearl Harbor was an incredible tragedy. More than 2,000 Americans killed, many more wounded. Our battleship fleet devastated. It was, in many ways, even more of a disaster for the Japanese. You know why, Sam?
Well, they got a nuke dropped on them.
Yeah, it awakened the sleeping giant and brought the United States into the war against them. If you're going to go after the king, you can't just wound him, you got to kill him. And this just wounded the United States. Ken didn't come close to killing off America's war-making capacity. It's the last thing you want to make jokes about, nor is the analogy that he put forth in any way applicable. The critics were talking about Trump informing our allies. When it came to Japan, Trump was talking about the Japanese informing the target of their attack, the United States. Not only was it a terrible joke in terrible taste, totally uncalled for, but, it didn't even have any historical basis to it. If it was anyone but Trump, you can imagine the condemnation. But as you pointed out, Sam, Trump has done and said so many awful, horrendous things that it's hard to get excited about this one thing.
I would just say, of all the things, or the list of things Trump has said, this feels pretty low on. I don't know. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I thought it was kind of funny, to be honest with you. I mean, Pearl Harbor happened 85 years ago. It's not too soon to joke about Pearl Harbor. I mean, the joke itself wasn't that funny.
It was a terrible joke.
I was more it's more. I think what's funny is I was more laughing at him because he's just such an idiot.
It was so inappropriate and such a bad joke. The other thing is, whenever Trump says something outrageous and then wants to back off from it, what does he say? Oh, it was only joking. Even though he's never funny. I've never found Trump to be funny. He's not Chris Rock.
I don't know. Sometimes
he might like to be.
I do sometimes find him funny. Again, I don't think the jokes he makes are funny, but he's such a buffoon and he's such a character. Right. Again, I'm more laughing at him
than
I am with him.
Yeah, it's not that his jokes are funny or in good taste,
right,
or anything like that. They're just so ridiculous. You do wind up laughing at him, not with him.
I didn't think this was one to really clutch your pearls about personally. You seem to be upset about it.
It really bothers me a lot because I'm an
historian
of Pearl Harbor. I know what it was all about. And, I've said many, there are certain things you don't make jokes about. Or if you do, they better be darn good. You don't joke about Hitler. You don't joke about Nazis. You don't joke about Pearl Harbor.
You could make a Hitler joke.
No, I'm not going to.
Again, not a joke at Hitler, not a joke. I know,
but you got to be so careful. And so adroit when you're addressing these topics.
Obviously, I'm thinking of this from the perspective as just a, young man. If I was president, I wouldn't make a joke like that. And I agree, in the context of being president, it's pretty inappropriate.
And right in front of the Japanese PM, who you're trying to get to help you out in your crazy war. As I said, it's like throwing an anchor at a fish to try to catch it.
I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And again, it happened.
She did. Did you see her face?
I don't like her anyways.
I don't like her either, but that's irrelevant.
Right.
If you're trying to get her cooperation, that ain't the way to do it. Like so much else of what Trump does. I agree. There are so many worse things. We agree on that. But, sometimes small things are indicative. If you're trying to get her to help you, you don't throw this in her face.
Do you think you think Japan's actually going to help us?
No.
No?
But I don't really know. I'm no Japanese internal politics expert.
You're not?
My gut tells me no. But I've been to Japan. You've been to Japan.
Yes.
We liked it a lot.
I love Japan.
We've even been to Hiroshima. I remember your famous statement. They have this wonderful peace park in the midst of a lot of devastation that's still left. And you had this great comment. I don't know, you were 9 maybe. And you said, God, after this horrible thing we did to them, their response has been to make a peace park. That's really amazing.
Was I 9? I don't remember how old I was.
It was 2000.
Was it?
I think it was 2000.
Wow. Oh, someone just said hello from Japan. We've got someone watching from Japan.
Yeah.
PS Extreme. Even as a young, almost a child, I loved Japan, and I think I was the food freaked me out a little bit. I was a little too young for the food, but I don't know why I was so enamored with it. I guess the architecture and
the temples,
the culture, and the city. I don't know. All right, our next topic of the evening. I don't know if you know this, but Japan has sort of become like a meme that like everybody loves Japan.
Didn't used to be that way.
Right, didn't used to be that way.
Made in Japan used to be a big joke.
Really?
Yeah.
No, they don't really make much in Japan anymore.
Not anymore, but it used to be a big joke for, cheap knockoff stuff.
Now that's what? China, Indonesia.
China, Indonesia, exactly.
Yeah.
Vietnam.
Right. Even China, I've noticed over the years that even made in China has been slowly decreasing a little bit.
A little bit because of these other countries in Asia
Right.
that are coming in.
Right. A federal judge ordered the parent agency of The Voice of America to return the network's 1,042 full-time employees who had been put on leave back to work. The judge ruled that the Trump administration and official Kari Lake's efforts to dismantle the news outlet were, quote, arbitrary and capricious.
Wow.
Is that
you know who Kari Lake is?
Yes, the woman who's been trying to run for office in Arizona forever now.
Right. Entirely based on a bunch of lies
Right.
about election fraud. If anyone lies about election fraud as much as Donald Trump, it's Kari Lake,
yeah.
which is why he loves her so much. And her mission, crystal clear, was to dismantle the Voice of America. What an utterly misguided mission. The Voice of America has never been a propaganda outlet for either right or left, no matter whether it's President Obama or President George W. Bush. I've been on The Voice of America dozens upon dozens of times. It is a critical outlet for what we call American soft power. That is America's standing around the world and America's ability to get the truth out, to combat the propaganda put out by originally the Soviets, of course, but now the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Hungarians. You mention it. It's an incredibly cost-efficient means of promoting American values and democracy around the world. And guess what, Sam?
What?
Without killing anyone.
Oh.
Can you imagine that? So far into the Trump administration. But she, in effect, was an assassin, not literally killing people, but figuratively killing people who were working for the Voice of America. And for no good reason, because it wasn't a propaganda arm for Donald Trump, silencing a critically important voice for truth, for American values, for democracy. I am so glad to see a judge shoot her down.
Metaphorically.
All this is as I said, none of this involves killing people, Pete Hegseth. I know you don't like it because,
Yeah, Pete. Pete?
Yeah. Imagine you can do things abroad without killing a single person.
Wow.
I know you can't comprehend that.
All right. Oh. He needs his soda. Although
I need my soda.
someone got mad at us last time for doing product placement without people paying. Not that these companies would probably sponsor our show anyways, but here, boom.
Yeah, I wish they would.
Well, yeah, hell yeah. All right, we have one final topic before we move on to our question portion of the show. Someone donated and said, Sam, Trump isn't funny.
I agree. But you made a point.
Again, I'm not
laughing
with him. I'm laughing at him.
But I have trouble laughing at him even. He's so awful.
Oh, that was
dangerous.
That was George Politis, our good friend, who said that to me.
One of our good friends, yeah.
Our final topic. I thought this was a good topic since you are a prediction guy. A journalist reported a missile strike. Then the death threats came. A Times of Israel reporter says online gamblers pressured him to change his story about an Iranian missile strike so they could win a payout.
Yeah, this is something I briefly talked about before. The fatal fallacy of the prediction markets, where you can bet on almost anything, right? This was a bet on whether there'd be a missile strike in Israel at a certain time. The problem with all of this is it can be manipulated, just as these thugs were trying to manipulate this reporter. You can also take advantage of inside information. If you know when America is going to fire a missile because you're on the inside of the Trump administration, you can make huge amounts of money based upon your inside information. And this is just one example of most of what they put on these prediction markets that are subject to manipulation and subject to insider information. It's pernicious. It shouldn't be allowed. we should stop it. It's okay to bet on things that, you can't manipulate easily or aren't based on inside information, like the 2028 presidential election. But so much of what they have in these prediction markets is, in fact, susceptible to pressure and perhaps inside information.
But I don't think that's going to change anything. These prediction markets are making tons of money right now.
Yeah, money talks, right?
Yeah.
Everything else walks.
And I don't know. It feels weird to me to be betting on war and death. I don't know. That feels kind of, like you said, betting on elections or betting on sports or I mean, even on these prediction markets now, you can bet what word Trump will use in his press conference that day.
Right, and if you're his speechwriter, you got and there's
True.
no way they can control inside information.
I'm right. That's sort of a different topic. I was just talking about sort of the morality of gambling.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
War
Betting on
and
these
death.
horrific things.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if you can somehow get right, if you're a script writer, you have the transcript ahead of time. I guess you could just make a boatload of money on that.
Yeah, I'm sure people have.
Yeah. President Belichick says, "How can I become a good friend of the Lichtman so that I can be mentioned as their good friend on the stream?" President Belichick, you're our good friend.
I thought we already mentioned him.
We did.
We did. Now you get a double mention.
Double mention.
Because we know you're a great friend.
I feel like
us.
President Belichick, he's been around for a long time.
I think since we started. We had a bunch of presidents. Most of them seem to have dropped off. But welcome back, President Belichick.
I saw that this member, Azur Arum, has been a member for 18 months.
Wow.
So that's a long time, too. And thank you to Baboy QC for gifting 5 memberships. We appreciate that.
We really do. The memberships are critical and they're cheap. They're less than a milkshake, right? And healthier.
Less than a milkshake and healthier. All right, with that, we will move on to our question portion of the show. We have almost 900 people watching, but only 300 likes. Make sure you like the stream. It helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Turn on that notification bell so you know we're live. Remember, donators and memberships get priority on the question portion of our show.
Right, we're a little short on donations, so as we said, a lot goes into this. We don't do this. We can't do this up for nothing.
He taught a whole class today, and then came back and did the show.
Yeah,
so
2.5 hour class.
Wow. So you got a block class then?
Yes.
You prefer blocks then?
I do. I want to get it over with.
Right.
Not that I don't love it. I love teaching.
Right. You just some people prefer blocks.
I don't love the bureaucracy of the university, but that's another story.
You were saying that some people in your class said to you tonight they were going to tune in.
Yes. Some people in my class do tune in.
So shout out to
whoever is in my class that's on.
Right.
Make yourself known.
Yeah. Say hello in the chat.
Say hello.
All right. This is from George Politis. Professor, do you think this war with Iran is to be a bit of a distraction from the Epstein files?
I'm sure that's part of it, but I don't think that's the whole story by any means. I'm sure he loves the distraction from the Epstein files, but I think I explained the broader context that this fits in with the real meaning of America first for Donald Trump. That is, we're first around the world. We have the power. We can do anything that we want. Also, I've talked about this many times.
Many.
But we haven't talked about it tonight.
What?
Follow
the money.
The money. There's got to be a lot of money involved in this. Right off the top, this was, a huge thing in the war in Iraq. All kinds of companies, probably run by a lot of billionaire friends of Donald Trump, are going to make a huge killing from this bloated defense budget.
Right.
Not to mention the price of oil, which is going to benefit the fossil fuel people.
Right. Thank you to D-Cuz for your donations. We appreciate that. Rob's donating said, I'm a good friend of yours as well. Hi from Minnesota. Thanks to Rob's, our good friend.
Thank you.
Philip H has been a member for 20 months. That might be the record.
Might be.
Yeah.
We'll find out if anyone has been on longer. It's possible. How long have we been up?
Well, it depends when we started becoming monetized, because once you become monetized, you can start
right.
adding members.
When was that?
I don't know.
Probably about 20 months.
Axel Moreno has been a member for 19 months.
Wow.
I think 20 might be the highest.
I think that's around, where we got started.
Our next question is a $5 donation from Secular Monk.
Another good friend.
Professor, with the United States focused on Iran, What are the chances China attacks Taiwan with the U.S. distracted?
I thought, again, I'm not an expert on internal Chinese politics. I'm not sure anyone is.
I am.
All right, and you can answer this question.
Oh, skip.
I do think the chances are greatly heightened. This creates a real opportunity for China on many levels. We're wasting our armaments. We've got our resources focused on the Middle East rather than in East Asia. So I think, yes, I'm not sure China wants to do this, but if they do, this creates certainly an opening for them. And let me tell you, I've been to Taiwan. It's one of the most incredible, dynamic places I've ever seen. Even without a massive U.S. presence, the taking of Taiwan is no cakewalk. It's going to be very, very difficult for China, and they're going to lose a lot of people. I'm not sure the dictators care. Trump doesn't seem to care, and Hexas revels in the number of deaths he causes.
So it looks like, I was just looking at some of our metrics. It looks like our oldest member is from 25 months ago.
Wow, 2 years.
We've got a couple of 25-month members: Mary Lou, Patrick Murray, Easy Attack, E.K. Neff, Lisa McCallum, M. Ray. We got quite a bit of.
Wow, we got a lot. Yeah.
25-month members. And I think the last 25-month member is Tarrant. So thank you all for being 25-month members. We appreciate that. Joanne says, thank you for your knowledge. Thank you, Joanne. Our resident Giant fan, James Lagruta, says, for years, Republicans blame Biden for the botched Afghanistan withdrawal and assassination of 13 Marines. Meanwhile, we've already lost 13 service members in Iran for no legitimate reason. Why the selective outrage? Wait, no. You're telling me politicians have selective outrage? I can't believe it.
Yes. I many years ago, I was listening to an NPR broadcast, and some government official came on, and the anchor said, I'm accusing you of a double standard. And the guy replied, double standard? In politics and diplomacy, we have triple standards and quadruple standards. So I'm never surprised by these double standards. And of course, it all falls very much along partisan lines as well. The same people that were attacking Biden are cheerleaders for Trump.
Right. Do you think Trump thought about the consequences of bombing Iran? Is the war spiraling out of Trump's control?
Oh, it's definitely spiraling out of Trump's control, just as the Boer War spiraled out of the control of the British. It's a very similar kind of situation. Trump has no idea what to make of this or what to do. Do I pull out right away, or do I persist maybe for 200 more days or more until I win the war? But do I really know what it means to win the war? I guess for Hegseth, it would mean to kill all 90 million people in Iran. He so revels in death and destruction. But, beyond that absurdity, I don't think Trump has a clue what it means to win the war. And he certainly doesn't have the big brains around him to inform him, even if he was interested in listening to anyone.
Wow, Carol just donated $19.99. Thank you, Carol. Nice. This is from member Dirtier Dog. They say, I'm interested in how people will view Trump in future decades, given his base now. What are your insights on how people will view terrible presidents, and how does this change from during their term to retrospective? Will he have a, quote, never again moment regarding his corruption and tyranny?
Well, I don't like to speculate about what's going to happen in the future. But so far, if you look at authorities in the field and their ranking of the presidents, Trump comes in either last or behind someone horrible like Andrew Johnson or James Buchanan. But, either the very bottom or very close to the bottom. Rankings of presidents do change over time. Two presidents who benefited from enhanced ranking over time are Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower, who were not ranked that highly in the immediate aftermath or during their presidencies, but have since widely come to be ranked as not great, but near great presidents. I don't expect that to happen with Donald Trump.
This is from member Diane Kastner. Being from Pennsylvania, I'm perplexed by John Fetterman, who is voting to approve Mark Wayne Mullen for his appointment at DHS. Sadly, we don't have Bob Casey anymore. What are your feelings about Fetterman?
I am baffled by Fetterman. I don't understand him. When he was running, I thought he was a pretty smart, pretty progressive guy, but now he seems to be totally off the reservation, totally unpredictable, making decisions that seem to make absolutely no sense. Why would a Democrat possibly, vote for this guy who, like so many others in the Trump administration, seems to revel in violence and destruction, as Rand Paul, who I have no love for, but who so clearly pointed out during the hearings. It baffles me. I think he needs to be replaced with someone much, much better.
So you think Dem should primary him in 28, even though he's from a swing state?
Yes.
Okay. I remember years ago when he was like a mayor of some town outside of Pittsburgh, he was on Anthony Bourdain's show. I mean, this must have been, I don't even know when this was, but yeah, he seemed sort of like a possible like Bernie Sanders type,
Yeah, that's what I thought
figure
too.
that could come in and really change things. And that hasn't happened.
It's been a disaster. I don't know what his, guiding philosophy or position is.
Right. This is from Alex Kawa. In the Illinois primaries the other night, there were multiple races where the fields were so crowded that many candidates won not only with less than a majority, but with not even 30% of the vote in some cases. As a result, a lot of people are saying we need ranked choice voting. Do you agree?
We've talked about this before. I like ranked choice voting because it enables your second and third choices to be registered, and it doesn't stop until votes are allocated, until someone actually does get a majority. It's being used more and more, and I'm certainly a supporter. My only issue is, I don't want to make voting more complicated. So that's the other side of it.
Right. Axel Moreno asks, what did you think about Trump's response on dyslexics? It hurt personally as someone with dyslexia and ADHD.
You should take offense. It was,
What did he say? I missed this.
He said that Gavin Newsom should not be president because he has dyslexia.
Oh, my God. What?
Can you imagine? But this is typical of Trump. He's mocked people before for their disabilities. It's consistent. He sees himself as this great heroic figure, as kind of a modern day Alexander the Great. And, all of these inferior people, especially people with disabilities, just, don't deserve to have any position of authority and trust. It's just awful.
In 60 seconds, can you explain the oil reserve scandal under Harding? The Teapot Dome, I think?
Yes.
Hey,
as you know, the government has oil reserve. What?
Hey, Siri, set a 60-second timer.
As you know, the government has petroleum reserves with a lot of very valuable petroleum. Under the Harding administration, private oil interests bribed the Secretary of Interior, Albert Fall, to illegally release these very valuable petroleum reserves to them. They were caught. Fall was prosecuted, and he became the first member of a cabinet to be convicted and sent to jail. And Teapot Dome was also kind of a generic name like Watergate for a whole bunch of other scandals under Harding.
18 seconds left. You did it.
I did it.
Thank you to John Tier for gifting a membership. Why is Ho Chi Minh viewed as a hero in Vietnam, but often seen more critically in the United States?
Well, because he beat the United States. We lost the war. Ho Chi Minh was the leader of the communist North Vietnam who beat the United States, won the war. We pulled out. Ho Chi Minh, or the North Vietnamese, were able to unite the country as it is today behind the communist regime. So, of course, he is a huge hero to the people of Vietnam, but not so much to the United States, who fought this horrible war that cost us, I don't know, something like more than 50,000 lives, all to no end. There are so many wars that we have fought to no end, and we seem to be repeating that same cycle over and over again. You know, one of the biggest mistakes I made 20 years ago was to run for the United States Senate. Wasn't really suited for it, but I did have a lot to say. And I think one of the most important things I said 20 years ago, when the war in Iraq was beginning to go sour, I said, instead of spending trillions of dollars on these feckless wars that go nowhere, imagine if we had devoted a fraction of that spending to get off fossil fuels and adopt clean, renewable sources of energy. We wouldn't be involved anymore in these wars in the Middle East. And here we are again, having that, advice totally unheeded. Here we are again. As Ronald Reagan said in his debate with Jimmy Carter, there you go again. There we go again, making the same mistakes over and over and over, even though they're obvious. If you know anything about history, you know how obvious these mistakes are.
It feels like my whole life has been basically full of conflict between the U.S. and the Middle East. And
yeah,
it kind of felt like after we got out of Afghanistan, maybe the U.S. and even and Trump and MAGA people being upset about these forever wars, it seemed like maybe we were finally starting to pivot away from the Middle East. And here we are again, and it's pretty sad.
Incredibly sad. I forget who it was who said it. Maybe it's not attributed, but the only thing people seem to learn from history is that they learn nothing from history. Very sad. That's why I developed my system, Keys to the White House, to show you can learn something from history.
Right.
How much time do we have?
We have 9 minutes remaining.
All right.
This is from Brian Sheehan. Question for both Alan and Sam. What are your thoughts on edutainment content on YouTube in teaching history? Example, YouTube channels being Oversimplified History, Alternative History Hub, and Mr. Beat. Mr. Beat's our friend. You better watch out.
Yes.
I feel like personally I've learned more about history on YouTube than in most of my years in school.
I'll let you answer this. You're more attuned to what's on YouTube than I am.
I agree with your final statement. Like, I feel like through YouTube I've learned so much information. And yet, at times it might be oversimplified. And obviously, if you were to read a book about a certain topic, you would probably gain a lot more detail and information. But I don't know. I am a visual person. I'm also like a listener. Like, I'm not as much of a bookworm as probably most people. So I love YouTube and I love learning on YouTube. And I think channels like Mr. Beat are really great. I'm not sure if I've run into Oversimplified History or Alternative Hub History. But I also listen to The Rest is History a lot. So I think it's good, in my opinion, overall. I'm sure you can find plenty of examples of people maybe abusing this system, but I think there are some really good channels
People
out there.
abuse books too,
Right, yeah.
Not everything that's written down in a book is necessarily correct.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I'm not familiar because I don't really listen to these, but I would not dispute what you say.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for not disputing, Dad.
Yeah. If I thought you were wrong, I'd be disputing.
Right.
But you're right.
Thanks. Peaceful Resistor just donated and said, another great show. Thank you, Peaceful Resistor. This is a $10 donation from Here for Today, 42. A friend lost his health insurance. Without subsidy, he would have paid 2/3 of his income for a premium. One major medical issue and he could lose his life savings. Why don't Trumpers speak out on this?
It beats me. All this is due to Trump and his allies in Congress. Of course, we might as well not have a Congress, right, Sam?
Yeah, at this point.
It's just totally abdicated all of its power and has become meaningless, become a joke. Speaker Mike Johnson, who claims the Almighty talks to him, is arguably the least powerful, the most feckless, the most ineffective speaker in the history of the country. That's, quite a distinction. So it's amazing because a lot of the people most affected by Trump's cuts are Trump's base. The ordinary folks particularly folks out in rural areas where rural hospitals are being threatened. But I have seen something that may be indicative, and that is he does seem to be losing support among those voters who are less affluent and don't have a college education. So maybe the pinch of Trump's policies, which affect his previous base the most, are starting to have an effect. And he is starting to lose some support in what has been his strongest demography.
Right. We're almost at 500 likes. Let's try to get there, folks. Like the stream if you haven't already. This is from Gish Gallop is a real word.
Yeah.
You've said you think Netanyahu lured Trump into the Iran conflict. Do you think Israel stands to benefit from the war at all, or just Netanyahu himself?
Well, Netanyahu himself particularly stands to benefit. This is his dream. You know, he's kind of the Pete Hegseth of Israel, believes in death and destruction is a good thing for his country, and he has always dreamed of devastating what he sees as hostile Arab nations and obliterating their ability to do harm to Israel. That's certainly why this war fits right into what Netanyahu, the Donald Trump of Israel, actually believes. Whether it helps Israel as opposed to Netanyahu is a much more complex question. Unfortunately, support for Israel often gets confused with support for Netanyahu, and the two are very different. I support America, doesn't mean I support Donald Trump. I certainly support Israel's right to survival and be safe and not be attacked, but I abhor the administration of Netanyahu. And in the long run, its effects on Israel are ambiguous. You know, Netanyahu, through his program of death and destruction, has really turned Israel into an international pariah in the eyes of many. He's even a war criminal. In the long run, that is not good for Israel.
Right. Professor, Joe Kent, the head of counterterrorism, said recently he was not involved in the meetings leading up to the attack on Iran, that only a select few had Trump's ear. Your thoughts, please?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how much advice Trump takes from anyone. I was astounded by the testimony of his boss. You know who his boss is?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
And she was asked, was it the assessment of the intelligence community that Iran was an imminent threat or not? You know what she said? Only the president can decide that. So the CIA is not supposed to make an assessment of worldwide threats. That's somehow independent of that, based on, I guess, what Donald Trump called his feeling, the president, bereft of information and analysis, is supposed to make that decision. It's one of the most, it hasn't been commented on enough. It's one of the most astounding things I have ever heard, that, you know, we should now be basing life and death, war and peace, on one man's feelings, not on solid information and solid analysis. So I'm not surprised that there were not many involved in the decision-making for Donald Trump, assuming what he says is right.
This is a $10 donation from the Switchboard. Professor, can you comment on how Hegseth's resume lines up with other secretaries of defense? I feel like before the time of Trump, we didn't hear much about cabinet positions.
Yeah, he's certainly the least qualified Secretary of Defense we ever had. Compare him to James Mattis, the great general who was Secretary of Defense in the first Trump administration. As far as I understand, his only military experience was as a low-level commander, many, many levels below a general officer in the military. He had some administrative experience with some foundations or small businesses and did not do well in administering them. There were also very serious accusations of womanizing and alcohol problems, which, by the way, sank a much more qualified appointee for Secretary of Defense, Senator John Tower, a senator who was accused of particularly of having an alcohol problem and was bounced. But qualifications don't seem to mean very much, if they mean anything. It's almost anti-qualifications in the Trump administration.
I'm still a little surprised a lot of these people got through. I'm still a little surprised that Patel, Hegseth, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. I'm a little surprised those people got through, to be honest.
I'm not.
Really?
Yeah, because I think, again, people are wrong. Yeah, it's partly that people are afraid of Trump in the Republican Party. But when you read my book, right behind us, Sam,
Right.
Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism, you'll see the deeper meaning is they agree with him. Trump is not the destructor of conservatism. He's not a non-conservative. He is the culmination of American conservatism. 90% of self-identified conservatives voted for him last time. That's a record. He even beat the record of the icon Ronald Reagan. To say he's not a conservative when almost every conservative supports him is nonsense. Plus, I looked at 100 years of history to prove and demonstrate this. By the way,
BT Dub.
have you heard of Oxford University, Sam?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. I think it was just ranked number 1 in the world.
Wow.
It's the most finest university. I
Bunch
just
of-
got an invitation from Oxford University to participate in the Oxford Union prestigious debates on the basis of my book, which they said, over there in England was one of the most important and significant analyses that has come out on American conservatism.
Bunch of smarty pants over at Oxford, huh?
I guess so. I don't know who I'll be debating, but
do you have
I'm
to
ready for him.
Do you have to do the whole debate in a British accent?
I should think so, and I'll have a stiff upper lip.
All right, this will be our final question tonight. It's a teaching question. This is from Turbid TG1. How do you combat cheating with ChatGPT and AI?
Yeah, I'm not the greatest. When
He
it comes
doesn't.
to-
I'll tell you the honest truth.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
I don't. But what I do is I have assignments that are not easy to replicate via AI, and I know my students, and if they have something coming out of AI, I'll recognize it.
Well, your midterms are in-person blue books, right?
Right.
So-
No, they're in person on the computer.
Oh.
But
Well,
they don't have time to go to AI.
I think the university probably blocks them because I
Yeah.
remember when I was in college, they were starting to move
I'm
from
sure they
blue
block
books to
them. They don't
computer.
have time. I have a lot of questions. I have like a dozen questions on my midterm. You don't have time to go to AI.
I don't know about that one. I think probably most likely the university has blocks
Has
up
blockage
that you can't
Yes.
access other sites while you're taking a test.
Yeah.
I don't think the time thing is that. I mean, you could literally copy paste the question in the AI and get the question within 10 seconds. But anyways, he's just not very tech savvy. So the university probably covers most of the guardrails against
As
that.
I said, I'd recognize it. know.
No, I say no shot. I
know
shot.
how polished my students are and how astute
Mm.
they are. And if they come out with something, that looks like something a professor would write, I'd recognize it.
Okay, I'll give that to you. All right, with that,
And I don't have to be tech savvy to do that.
right, you just gotta be smart guy.
Who's been teaching for 53 years
True.
and has seen everything.
Do you have what's the strangest excuse or funniest excuse anybody's
I
ever
never
given?
listen to excuses.
Okay.
The only time one of the very few times in 53 years, I've credited an excuse, aside from a doctor's note, obviously.
Right, right.
Yeah. But just a verbal excuse was when a student came to me and said, I came out of the closet today.
And so they couldn't turn it in
Couldn't
this
turn, yes. I said, fine, I'll give you a makeup.
I was going to say that's. I mean, if it's real, which who knows if it's real.
Whether it was real or not, if you're willing
Right.
to say something like that, you're going to get an excuse.
I feel like if a young person, in college was coming out of the closet that day, it would be a pretty intense.
This was 20
day.
years ago.
Okay, yeah.
It wasn't like today.
Interesting. I've never heard that one before,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's a good one, huh?
Yeah. All right.
Better than the dog ate my homework, huh?
Right.
Although Kiko would.
You used to tell me you used to grade your exams by standing at the top of the stairs and throwing them.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And whichever one landed
Yeah,
further down the stairs got an A, and whichever one's floated back to the top of the
I
stairs.
spend a lot of time grading my exams.
That's a
as
joke.
you know.
That's the old joke
That's
we
the
used to
worst
say.
old joke. Not as bad as Trump's jokes, but pretty bad.
Right. All right. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. We will be back on Tuesday, unless sometimes in the last couple of months, there's been some Saturdays we've had to come on for breaking news, and with a war raging, who knows? But we will probably see you on Tuesday,
if not before.
With that, what are your final words to the people, Dad?
Good night. We are in a war. Don't confuse it with anything else. We are in a war with profound implications for the future of the country and the world. Cannot overstate how important this is. And it's not just a matter of this egomaniacal president saying, we won, we have victory. He told us that day one. And what are we in now? Something like day 19?
I'm not sure.
We're still nowhere near victory. And whatever victory may mean, I have no idea what it means for this president.
Yeah. Right. Quick shout out to Joanne Roberts, Andy Haas for your donations. And good night.
Good night. You're not doing after.
No after show tonight. Good night.
Good night.